Welcome to Adult Sabbath School Podcast. Please subscribe to the channel, share it with a friend, and write any questions or comments you have below.
How do you square the idea of a loving, just God with a command to destroy an entire group of people? This is the core issue we're going to unpack together. So, to really get a handle on this, we've got to go right to the source and look directly at the biblical command that causes so much unease in the first place. Yeah, the book of Joshua, it does not pull any punches. It presents these scenes of warfare where one group is told they have a divine mandate, a command from God to destroy another. And right away, that just raises these profound ethical and theological questions about violence and God's will. And check out this passage from Joshua. It just lays it right out there. The land was captured because the Lord God of Israel fought for Israel. See, it's not just about human armies and strategy. The text makes a direct, unmistakable link between God's action and the military conquest. This is what makes it so tough to grapple with. Okay, so why? Why was this command given? The biblical framework itself tells us that to get the what, you first have to understand the why. And that means we have to look at the context of the Canaanite people at the time. And this is a really crucial point. The text doesn't frame this as some random act of aggression. It's presented as a final judgment. The specific language used is that the iniquity of the Amorites, who were the Canaanites, had become full. It's this idea that a moral limit had finally been reached. So what does iniquity actually mean here? Well, it's not some vague idea. The texts and, archaeological finds like the Ugaritic texts actually back this up. They point to some really specific and frankly disturbing cultural practices. We're talking about things like child sacrifice and ritual sexuality being woven into the very fabric of their society and worship. And this wasn't something that happened overnight. The sources lay out this idea of a long period of probation. The judgment wasn't sudden at all. The narrative says that hundreds of years went by, a time when the patriarchs were living in that very land, basically acting as a witness to a different way of living. So the action is presented more like a delayed punishment, something that only happened after a long period of patience had run out. Okay, so this next point is a huge reframing of the whole situation. What was the actual goal of the conquest? Was it just total annihilation? So look at this, because this distinction is absolutely key. The argument is that God's primary goal, the intent, was dispossession, to drive the people out and cleanse the land of a deeply corrupt culture, symbolized by things like pagan altars. Destruction, then, is presented as the consequence for those who stubbornly refused to leave, who fortified their cities and decided to fight, essentially becoming one with the culture that was being judged. All right, so if this was this one-of-a-kind divine judgment, were there rules? You bet. And this wasn't like any conventional war we might think of. It was a highly specific, highly regulated event. And it all centers around this Hebrew word, cherem. Now, cherem doesn't just mean destruction. It's more like something devoted or set apart exclusively for God. When you apply that to war, it meant the people and the spoils were put under God's direct judgment, taking them completely out of human hands for personal profit or glory. And when you look at the actual rules for cherem, it's fascinating just how restrictive they were. First, only God could start it, not some ambitious king. It was fought by a citizen army, not professional soldiers. And this is critical. There was zero personal profit, no plunder allowed. All of this, plus the fact that it was limited to a very specific time and place, was meant to keep it from ever becoming a blueprint for empire building. So here's the bottom line, and it's a big one. The sources are crystal clear that this was seen as a unique, non-repeatable historical event tied directly to the special government, the theocracy of ancient Israel. Once that theocracy ended, the practice of cherem became obsolete. It is explicitly not a model for any kind of modern conflict. Okay, which brings us right back to where we started, that big central question. How can a loving God also be a God of judgment or wrath? And the text offers another really powerful way to think about this. It suggests that the real opposite of God's love isn't wrath, it's indifference. Think about it. A God who is just apathetic to evil, who didn't react to things like child sacrifice, could you really call that a loving God? In this view, divine wrath is the active, passionate opposition of a loving creator against anything and everything that harms his creation. And you can kind of see this idea as having four big roots, all flowing from God's character as described in the text. There's his holiness. this nature that is just fundamentally incompatible with evil. There's his righteousness, which means justice must ultimately be served. Then there's his respect for free will, which means our choices have real, serious consequences. And it all comes full circle back to his love, which is presented as this fierce, protective force that stands against whatever harms the world he made. But, and this is so important, holy war is not where the story ends, not by a long shot. In fact, it stands in stark contrast to the ultimate vision for humanity that the Old Testament builds towards. Yeah, this is a huge point to remember. While those really difficult passages about war are there, the whole prophetic direction of the Old Testament, it's all bending towards peace. War is described as this temporary, awful necessity in a broken world, but it is never, ever the end goal. And all of that hope really comes together in the figure of the Messiah. And he isn't painted as some great general, but as the Prince of Peace. His kingdom is described as a place where violence just stops, where even natural enemies can live together, and where there is no more destruction or hurt. That's the definitive, final vision. And of course, this vision points directly to Jesus in the New Testament. His way of winning just completely flips our worldly ideas of power on their head. He doesn't achieve victory with a sword. He wins by losing, by absorbing all that violence and defeating evil through this radical, self-sacrificial love on the cross. His victory completely redefines what power even means. So that's where we'll leave it. This ancient framework with its tough ideas about judgment, its very specific rules of engagement, and its ultimate vision of a peace won through sacrifice. It's complex, for sure. It doesn't give us any easy black and white answers. But what it does do is challenge us, right? It forces us to ask some deeper questions about our own ideas of justice, mercy, and what it really means to build a better world.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.